Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome to another video, another live stream. A live stream in which we're going to be talking about anything and everything in this video. And the main bulk of the video, I want to talk about the Premier League, and I want to talk about, obviously, it all being 4 games into it. We're going to be talking all about the start to the new season, what teams have done well, what teams have impressed, what teams haven't done so well, what teams need to obviously improve upon as the season continues. Of course, we're in the midst of an international break right now. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Premier League football and club football in general is on the verge of returning this weekend. We just have to get for another few days of the boring internationals, which is always a momentum killer. And that's another thing that I'm going to be talking about in this video to start things off with. But before we get into all of that, we're going to be talking about Paul Pogba as well. We're going to be talking about the Premier League, anything else that you guys want to talk about as well. Like I always say, feel free to hit the comment section, hit the chat with any kind of questions or any kind of topics of conversation you guys want to talk about. We'll all make for great reading, I'm sure, and we'll all be very appreciative of that. And we'll be very interested to see what you guys can come up with. But always like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever be greatly appreciated. But for now, let's get into the video. Let's talk about anything and everything. Like I say, we're going to start things off. We're talking about the international break. Look, I'm not a fan of the international break. I don't know if you've gauged that opinion from any of my previous videos. I've ever talked about the international break from years gone by. But I'm never a fan of the international break. I think there is a time and a place for it, but not right at the beginning of the season. Not right at the beginning of the season, especially with a summer that hasn't had any international football. Any senior level of international football. We've of course had women's football, and we've of course had under 21s football, but not the senior squad level of football. And, you know, international football doesn't excite me unless it's at a senior level, and also if it's not at a major tournament. So the Euros next year, I'll be definitely watching that. The World Cup in a few years' time, I'll definitely be watching that. International friendlies and the Nations League and qualifiers do not excite me. And the reason is that maybe it's just being an England fan because, you know, well, not necessarily an England fan, but maybe being in England, it doesn't really necessarily excite us as much as what it used to, because we're bored of it. I understand international football on other levels, on other stages, and in other countries is massive. I know that obviously the teams like Brazil and Portugal and Spain and things like that love international breaks. They love seeing the players kind of return and gel for the pride of their nation, and that's amazing and great to watch. But for England, it's never quite the same, and I think it's because a few different reasons, really. I think it's because of the manager that we have that isn't exactly exciting. It isn't exactly brilliant having Gareth Southgate there. Yes, he's led us to some great finishes, not the best finishes, obviously, because we have never won the tournaments, but he led us to some good finishes that we haven't had in a number of years gone prior in major tournaments since obviously his reign as manager. Obviously led us to a semi-final in the World Cup several years ago, led us to the final of the European Championships a couple of years ago. And then, of course, in last year's World Cup, we got knocked out in the quarterfinals. So, you know, it's been okay, but it hasn't been great. But Southgate doesn't exactly fill us with much excitement. There's also the case that Southgate has his favourites and is picking players based on reputation rather than form. How can a guy like Harry Maguire and a guy like Calvin Phillips, who have barely played any football, get game time when other players who are getting game time are not even picked, the likes of Raheem Sterling and James Ward-Prowse as examples? It's just baffling to me in that aspect. Like I say, maybe it is just being an England fan with these kind of issues that we have with the manager especially. But international breaks in general just don't seem to cut it for me at this early stage. Like, I've been wanting and waiting for the Premier League to return for a few months during the summer. And then when it does return, you get a month of it. You get the final month of the transfer window as well. And then suddenly the transfer window closes, the club football stops, and international football takes over for 2 weeks. And it has felt like an extremely long 2 weeks. I'm not so much of a big fan of international football, but what I will say is that I don't mind the breaks here and there. I wouldn't mind it if there was only one break between now and Christmas, for example, or now and March. Like, if you had the November break, I don't mind the November break so much. I prefer it not to happen in general, but I wouldn't. I prefer it to be one. I wouldn't prefer there to be a September break, then an October break, and then a November break. I just think it breaks up the season too much, which is why I kind of like the March break of international football, because the March break is kind of symbolic in the way that, to me, it means that, okay, you've got 2 weeks before club football resumes, and then when club football resumes, it's important. It's the run-in. It's the final end. It's the final furlong towards the end of the season. That's where everything starts to heat up. That's where the expectation level rises. That's where, apart from obviously the Carabao Cup, your cup games get more intense. That's where your league games get more intense as we count down towards the end of the season. So in that aspect, like I say, I'm not so bothered about that particular break. But to have 3 breaks between now and Christmas is mad to me. It's mad to me that we still have those, and especially because the games are not exciting. The games are pointless. The games are pointless international friendlies. Now I get it. England versus Scotland is happening tonight, and it's a friendly, and obviously it's a big rivalry. But it's a friendly at the end of the day. Like, who cares? Like, it's a friendly. If Scotland win, Scotland get a bit of bragging rights and get a bit of a laugh at England's expense. So what? If England win, they should win because they're England and they've got the better team. There you go. That's it. It's pointless. Like, friendly games, just pointless to me in that aspect. So the international breaks, when they fill them up with pointless filler of stupid international friendlies, and you know, even the qualifying acts like pointless international friendlies as well. Like, when you look at England's group and you see that they're paired with the likes of Malta and, you know, San Marino pretty much every other year, and, you know, all these minor nations. No offense to the minor nations, but if you're there to make up the numbers, you get battered each and every year. Like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to be horrible in any sort of way. I'm just saying that they're pointless if you're pairing up big teams with the smaller teams. Because even if they do get a good result against them bigger teams, it's not sustainable, and it's not going to be enough for them to qualify for a major tournament. And even if it is, the bubble will eventually burst when they get to that major tournament. And whilst it would be good for the nations to get to that tournament and just to experience that kind of tournament, sometimes you just, it is a little like, what is the point? But, you know, that's by the by, I guess. But yeah, my main criticism of international breaks is the pointless friendlies and the amount of them during a season. Like I say, I wouldn't have 3 between now and Christmas. Like, I just think it's pointless. I think the alternative thing to do is to have them have 2 during the season, 1 in November, 1 in March. I'm happy with that. And then to play the rest of the games at the end of the season, or something along those lines, or something along those lines. I just don't like it. I think there's too much international football. I think the Nations League situation as well makes it even worse. People cry and moan over the amount of football that's being played. I think it's ridiculous that, you know, they're getting to that point as well where they're crying over more games. There's going to be more games next year when the Champions League rolls around. There's going to be more games, more time added on, more everything like that along them lines. That's happening to football right now. And I just think it's stupid that the international break is still happening with these pointless friendlies. That when we have a manager who is not the best, it's pointless. It's pointless in my opinion, and that brings me on to like Gareth Southgate as well. Southgate, like I say, there are just so many things that this guy. I've been calling for this guy's head since Russia 2018, since Croatia. They lost in the semi-finals to Croatia. I've been calling for this guy's head since then. I've been saying that this guy, okay, it led us to a semi-final, great, but he should have done. There was absolutely no reason why he shouldn't, and there's probably no reason why he couldn't have actually gone on any further in that competition to at least the final to meet France. Like, this guy should have beaten Croatia with the squad that he had. With the way that we went 1-0 up, the way that the game was going until about the hour mark, maybe, he should have gone on to win that game. But the first time he came up against a difficult challenge, he crumbled. He made substitutions way too late. He made the wrong subs. He put on the wrong players. He messed up completely. And then the same mistakes that he made in 2018 happened again in 2021 when he met Italy in the final. And the first major test that he came up against in that competition, he messed up again. And he made the same mistakes and he bottled it. And in a penalty shootout as well, he bottled it. And then he makes the same mistakes again a year later in the World Cup in Qatar when playing against France in the quarterfinals. He's made the same mistakes 3 times in a row at major tournaments, and people still give him the whole, well, we got to a good stage of the competition, so we still got some credit in the bank. Like, no. This guy has come into possession of a team that has got incredible potential. This guy is coming to a team that is very exciting. This guy is coming to a team that has got the engine of a Ferrari with a lot of raw power, a lot of potential, and a lot of talent to it. But the outfit of the team is being covered by a manager who is like a Fiat Punto. Fiat Punto outlook with the engine of a Ferrari. It's being restricted. It's being shackled down, shall we say. And like I said, I've been calling for Southgate's head for a while, when I think it's about time he leaves before he messes up another tournament for us. If we want to see England ever win a tournament, I'm not too particularly bothered as of right now. But if we ever, but in saying that, I have seen how the whole country comes together and how the whole country is absolutely amazing. There are also obviously some areas and some points you can make about how people get too carried away, but there are always going to be things like that happen. But for the most part, the whole country coming together, I've seen it in these past tournaments. It has made the kind of unity of the country be even more excellent than it ever has been. And I get that. But if we ever want to see England actually go on to win another major tournament, we're going to need a better manager. And I put out a short last week that basically stated that maybe it's time the FA considered Graham Potter. The whole story was obviously that Potter had turned down a move to Lyon. Obviously not been in management since being sacked by Chelsea. I said that if he's turned down Lyon, I think he may have something in the pipeline lined up. He may just be wanting extra time away from management to regather his thoughts and maybe to learn from a few things and from a few mistakes that he made. With the way that he plays football, with the team that England currently have, I think Potter is the perfect choice. And add on to the fact that he's also English. And I do actually believe that in international football, if you are to go with the whole nations thing, your manager should be of that same nationality. I just personally believe that should be the case, but that's something that's debatable. So yeah, fair enough on that one. But like I say, Potter for me will be the perfect choice, and I think should be in charge by 2024. I doubt that will happen. Southgate seems to have the FA wrapped around his little finger, and it just seems like he can do whatever he wants. And yeah, whatever the case may be there. But that's just my opinion on it. We're going to move on because I've had my rant about the international break and how boring it is. But thank God we are almost back to club football. Predictions video is going to be out tomorrow. So we're definitely back for the weekend's games. That's going to be exciting and interesting. So yeah, I can't wait for that. But fortunately, international football is almost over for another few weeks until the next one, which happens obviously this time next month. So yeah, get ready for that. I want to talk about this whole Paul Pogba situation. Yesterday, it was revealed that Paul Pogba of Juventus has been provisionally suspended for anti-doping offences. Apparently, he tested positive for testosterone, and that is why he is banned as of right now, or temporarily suspended, pending, obviously, further clarification on the substance that was found that is seen to be illegal. As allegedly, he could face between 2 to 4 years being banned from football if obviously there is no logical explanation or no logical reasoning behind why a banned substance was found in his sample. He's done, isn't he? He's pretty much done. Like, he's had a career, or is coming towards the end of his career as it is. He's 30 years of age. His body has been failing him for the past few years. He's a player that's never quite hit the heights that his potential has set before him. Ability-wise, unbelievable. We just have never really seen it on a consistent enough basis, particularly after making his move from Juventus to Manchester United. And of course, like I say, he's just a player that his body's been failing on him for the past few years. It never materialized into the world-class player that we know he could have got to. We know he had the potential. We know that he had the ability. He just never had the consistency. He never had, I guess you could say, luck with injuries, I guess, a bit of luck here and there. But at the same time, I think sometimes you've got to help yourself a little bit. I don't think he helped himself either. It's a shame. It is a shame to an extent. But yeah, it's just one of them things. Like I say, with him being 30 years of age right now, Pogba, let's say he does get a 2, 3, 4 year ban. Yeah, there's still time for him maybe to return to football at some level. It won't be at a top level, obviously, but he'll be obviously his chances of playing football if he does return after those 2, 3, or 4 years will be that Saudi Arabia is still going strong and would take a chance on maybe giving him a big payday for a year or two, maybe just to help see out the rest of his career in retirement. So that would probably be the only extent for him. We'll obviously have to wait and see what happens with the follow-up to this, and obviously whether or not this is legitimate and whether or not this will actually happen or not. But of course, this is a big... it's a big thing, obviously, against Paul Pogba, and another thing that goes against him in his career, and another big thing that obviously is just another baffling moment in his career, I guess you'd say. Another baffling moment in his career, to the point where, this guy, it's not like he's got a bad resume. It's not like he's got a bad CV and things that he's won in football. He's a multiple-time Serie A winner, a multiple-time Italian Cup winner, multiple-time Cup winner in general, wherever he's been, whether it be at Manchester United, where he won the Europa League, and League Cup. He's won cups at both Man United and Juventus, and even on an international level. I think, was he part of the French squad that won the Nations League as well as obviously the World Cup? I think so. So, you know, it's not as if this guy hasn't had a good career. It's not as if this guy doesn't have a good CV and a good trophy cabinet and winners' medals and all of that good stuff. This is just a guy that has had unfortunate cases with injuries over the recent years, but ultimately, whether it be down to attitude, mentality, or injuries itself, just hasn't quite hit the heights and expectation that his potential set before him. When, of course, he was breaking into that Manchester United senior squad at a young age, and United fans were so high on this guy and had high expectations and high hopes for this guy that ultimately, when he did leave United for the first time to go to Juventus, people were seeing it as a missed opportunity. And then, of course, when Jose brought him back, or was it Van Gaal? Was it Van Gaal or Mourinho? I can't remember which one it was. I want to say it's Jose, but could have been Van Gaal. Whoever it was, Van Gaal or Mourinho brought him back. It was seen as a huge move, a huge moment. And, you know, they were hoping it would have been a turning point because United obviously had faltered the past couple of years before him. So, yeah, it hasn't exactly gone to plan for him, but this might be the last we've seen of Paul Pogba, to be fair. This might be the last we have seen of Paul Pogba in this scenario. So let's move on to the Premier League then. 20 minutes in, and we are finally getting to the main bulk of the video. The Premier League is 4 games old into the new season, and it has already produced some great goals, a few great moments, a few controversial ones as well, new refereeing laws, which don't really benefit the game, in my opinion. And ultimately, a familiar sight at the top of the table. 6 teams are currently unbeaten so far this season. One of them is completely perfect. And there's no prizes for guessing that completely perfect 100% record team right now is, of course, Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. 4 wins out of 4. Pep Guardiola's side have picked up from where they left off last season. Unbelievable. The treble winners, the 3-time in a row Premier League holders are going strong yet again. 4 wins out of 4. Big victories against the likes of Sheffield United, Newcastle, Fulham, and another team that escapes me. Burnley, of course, on the opening day of the season. Yes, of course it was. City going off strong. City starting off the season where they left off. And, you know, they've had a bit of luck. There's been a couple of dodgy refereeing decisions that have kind of gone in their favour to help them. But ultimately, there will be bigger tests on the horizon, you would imagine, for them to occur. Elsewhere, you've got Tottenham, Liverpool, West Ham, Arsenal, and Brentford, who are unbeaten. Tottenham in second place right now. And again, they are a bit of a surprise team, I guess you'd say, to kick the season off with. No one was really knowing what was going to happen with Tottenham this season. And no one was really anticipating what was going to happen with them in terms of how good they'd be or how bad they'd be. They were kind of an unknown team, and I think that's kind of worked in their favour a little bit. And it's been really good to see Ange Postecoglou really take to the Premier League so far. And they're weirdly likeable now, Spurs. I've got to admit, they're weirdly likeable. They were sort of likeable under Pochettino. For whatever reason, I go back to like Harry Redknapp days where Tottenham were really likeable, in my opinion. Like, I found Tottenham really likeable under Harry Redknapp, and I just feel that with Postecoglou. He's got something like that with him. like that Harry Redknapp factor where he makes himself look really likable. So I quite like Postecoglou for right now. I quite like what Spurs are doing and the way that they are building. I think Son as their striker needs to happen more. I think he did more in that one game against Burnley than Richarlison did in the past 3. And of course, the goal scoring output shows that, with Son getting a hat-trick in that game, whilst Richarlison is struggling pretty badly, to the point where it's not even funny anymore. But yeah, I think Spurs have done brilliantly well. I think they've recruited very well in the transfer window. I think the signings of Mickey van der Ven and James Maddison have been outstanding. I do worry about their lack of defensive cover. I think that might be an issue, particularly if Van der Ven gets injured. Not so much if Romero gets injured, I don't think, but I think if Van der Ven gets injured, I think there might be cause for concern with the defensive cover there. So I do worry about that. I think the goalkeeper had a bit of a shaky start, but has slowly grown in confidence. A couple of clean sheets for him has certainly built up his confidence. Big win over Manchester United, of course. And the resurrection, shall we say, of Yves Bissouma. He's been absolutely outstanding. Him and Pape Sarr have produced a very good midfield partnership in that midfield. And obviously James Maddison going off and doing what James Maddison does best, which is, of course, being the creative free spirit out there, certainly helps the balance of that midfield. So I think they've got a very good midfield brewing. Again, I think the lack of depth or quality in depth might be an area of concern if injuries do hit. I know that you can make that argument about most teams, but I think there is more of an argument, and it holds weight more to certain teams than it would to others. But I'm liking Spurs right now. Like they are weirdly likable. The manager is looking really good. The players are looking really good for the most part. Playing some good football, but like I've said in a couple of Premier League aftermath videos, we've been here before. In terms of we've seen the Spurs side on multiple occasions start a season off well under a new manager, and then it crumble when it gets to December. Will it happen again? Only time will tell, of course. But at the same time, I just would say to Spurs, don't get ahead of yourselves. There's still a long way to go. You're doing great right now. You're playing some good football. You're scoring goals. You're not conceding as many, although there were a couple of goals that you conceded to Burnley, which could have been avoidable. But at the same time, don't get ahead of yourselves, because that's what happens. And you let the expectation get to you. And we've seen it time and time again with Spurs, where I think right now the expectation level is not on them because no one was expecting anything of them. But the more notoriety you get by being good, the more expectation falls on your shoulders, the more the expectation changes, and the more weight that expectation gains. And when that comes down on Spurs in particular, we have seen them crumble so many times in the past that it wouldn't surprise me if something similar was to happen again. So I do worry in that aspect, but for right here, right now, Spurs have been doing great. And so fair play to them. Liverpool in third. Again, a little bit surprising because of how poorly they were last season, but Klopp deserves massive credit for the way that he's got this Liverpool midfield resurrected and rebirthed. Again, similar to Spurs, you do worry that there's a lack of depth, particularly in the defensive area. I've been pointing out that defensive area all summer. I've been saying that if the defense isn't going to get better in terms of the players that we have, in terms of Joe Gomez isn't going to step up his game again, Joel Matip's not going to step up, Konate is going to continue to be in and out of the squad with injuries, and Van Dijk isn't going to rediscover his best form, or at least good enough form to be one of the more consistent defenders of the Premier League at a good and top level, it doesn't matter what you do with that midfield because the defence will then let you down. And right now, the defence has been a bit shaky, but it's been okay to get through these games to the point where Liverpool are back to being unbeaten. To the point where Liverpool have faced a couple of tough games and have managed to get through them. The one that stands out for me, obviously, is that Newcastle game, going down to 10 men the way that we did and managing to stay in the game and produce a perfect game plan for any side that goes down to 10 men at a tricky away day, and of course are facing a side that likes to keep hold of the ball and obviously likes to try and break you down. I think that was a perfect performance by Liverpool in that aspect, in terms of staying in the game for as long as they could and then hitting them with a couple of sucker punches, in terms of putting on a couple of players that obviously helped with that, in terms of putting energy into that midfield and into the attacking lineup of Diogo Jota and Harvey Elliott. And then, of course, putting on Darwin Núñez, who is always going to have a field day, exploiting that Newcastle high line. I think that was perfect. A perfect game plan from Jurgen Klopp in that aspect. And obviously, he got the rewards with Núñez obviously getting on the score sheet. Not once, but twice in that game to, of course, be the match winner, the difference maker, turn the tie completely on its head and obviously send Newcastle home with absolutely nothing to show for their efforts in, of course, that defeat to the Reds in that one. A draw to Chelsea on the opening day of the season doesn't seem so bad now. Many people were losing their minds over it. I said at the time that, it wasn't a great performance by any stretch of the imagination, and we rode our luck at times, and we got a little bit fortunate to have come away with a point at all. But at the same time, a point away at Stamford Bridge isn't exactly a bad result. Stamford Bridge is always a tough place to go. I know people will say, well, Forest managed to win there. Yes, Forest did manage to win there. But on the opening day of the season, we weren't at our best. We got a point. It's not a bad point, and especially given the fact that we went on to beat Newcastle, we went on to beat Aston Villa as well in our recent game in quite comfortable fashion, much more comfortable than what I was expecting. And of course, we beat Bournemouth in there as well. It makes that result at the end of the season not look so bad, in my opinion. So, a good start to the season for the Reds there. Of course, there'll be tougher challenges. Of course, you'll have the Europa League to factor into it as well. And of course, you'll have the defensive situation of Liverpool to be put under the microscope more and more as the season wears on. But at the same time, like I say, it's going good right now. It's going really good right now. There's been a few hit and miss performances. There's been some top performances. Alisson continues to prove why he's the best goalkeeper in the world, in my opinion. I think Alexis McAllister settled down really well in that team. Dominic Szoboszlai has been absolutely outstanding so far. He is unbelievable how good he is. And I think if it wasn't for James Maddison, would possibly be one of the signings of the summer. And he's only going to get better, is Szoboszlai. If he can continue to improve his output in terms of goals and assists, which of course he's started off the season pretty much okay. I think he's got an assist and a goal so far in this campaign. And I think he's got it. I don't think it counted, but I think another potential assist he got was probably when, of course, Jota's goal against Bournemouth, where his shot was spilled by the goalkeeper. Technically, it's an assist. Technically, it's not. But at the same time, he's been absolutely outstanding for me, and I like a lot of Liverpool fans have taken to him pretty quickly. So I'm happy with the start that he's made. He's been unbelievable. Really, really happy. Really, really happy with the start of the season. Of course, transfer window wasn't great. I do worry about the defense, so there are a few worries there. But at the same time, so far, so good. And like I say, I think Klopp needs a massive amount of credit for the way that he's rebirthed and got this midfield to play his way of playing. instantly. The pressing of Szoboszlai is endless. And whoever you work in there with him, whether it's McAllister or whether it's Curtis Jones or whether it's Harvey Elliott, the energy level is seemingly back in that midfield, something that we were lacking so much last season. I'm interested to see if the continuation of Trent moving more inverted is going to continue. Endo coming in may help with that. It may benefit with that. He just needs to obviously bleed in with time. It's going to be interesting to see how Liverpool can do this season. Like I say, so far so good. There are going to be bigger tests on the horizon, of course. Wolves on a 12:30 kickoff. As much as Liverpool should be winning that game when it comes around on Saturday, Jesus Christ, it is set up to fail for Liverpool, isn't it? Because it's 12:30 on a Saturday against a side that they should be beating. Like, don't count your chickens too much. Liverpool should be winning that game, but Jesus Christ, we've failed so many times with these types of fixtures that it wouldn't surprise me if Wolves do manage to get something from that game. They just turn up for one game this season, and it's going to be that one. Like, yeah, it could be a bit of an awkward one for us. So don't count it just yet. But so far, so good for the Reds. West Ham, big surprise package. 10 points from their opening possible 12. 3 wins, 1 draw. In 4th place right now. They've done brilliant. And, you know, many people thought losing Declan Rice, they were going to get worse. Many people knew that obviously last season they prioritized the Europa Conference League over the Premier League, which is why they ended up finishing so low rather than their usual 7th place finishes. They've done well. They've done well. They've brought in a couple of decent players that look good. Antonio and Jared Bowen seem to be back on form. Yeah, I can't fault David Moyes and West Ham at all. I think they've been playing some good stuff. They've not had the majority of possession in their games or in most of their games. But like I say, possession is 9/10 of the game, and it's about what you do with it rather than how much of it you have. And West Ham have been using it effectively. If you want a prime example, go back to that Brighton game where they won 3-1. Absolutely outstanding from West Ham, that they took their chances when they came and they used the ball more effectively. Yes, they capitalised on some defensive errors from Brighton, but at the end of the day, you've got to still put the ball into the back of the net, which they managed to do so. Like I say, Bowen and Antonio in particular started off the season pretty well for the Hammers there, and fair play. However, how long this stays for and how long this keeps up for, again, I think defensively they may lack a little bit of protection in terms of cover. Europa League, when that starts, that might be a bit of an issue for the Hammers. But in saying that, you know, it's looking good right now. It is looking pretty good right now for West Ham. So we'll wait and see on that one. Arsenal in 5th. Don't think Arsenal have been as good this season as they did last season so far. I think having to bed in a few new players has obviously taken its toll. Obviously, the injury to Jurrien Timber is extremely unfortunate for them, and obviously it's been a bit of a sucker punch for them to begin their season. But that win against United, you saw how much it meant to them, and that can really kick on their season. Again, I don't think they were amazing against United. I don't think they played particularly brilliant or great stuff or anything along those lines. But they managed to get the job done. Some will say it was slightly fortunate, but at the same time, you still have to be there to get the job done, and they did so in injury time. I thought they were comfortable for 70-odd minutes against Nottingham Forest, and then for the final 20, they panicked. They managed to get over the line in that one, but they panicked. Beating Crystal Palace. Again, they weren't great in that game, but they managed to get the job done in the tricky away ground at Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. Drawing to Fulham was a terrible result, especially when considering that Fulham were 10 men down, or were down to 10 men in that game in the final stages of that particular match. 2-1 up at the time, and then conceding very, very late on. Poor result. Can't get away from that. Poor result. But they managed to recover, obviously, against United at home. I do sort of, it has to start clicking for Arsenal. And it has to start clicking soon. I know we're used to saying that City are normally the ones to have a bit of a slow start and then they start shifting through the gears as the season goes on. But no, for me, Arsenal need to start shifting through the gears ASAP because, they got a little bit fortunate against United. Against Fulham, they got found out a little bit. Palace on another day, I know that the referee didn't help by sending off Tomiyasu in a stupid move by the referee. But at the same time, on another day, that could have gone against them as well. And against Forest, if that game had gone on for like another 10 minutes or so, Forest might have actually managed to get a point from that game because Forest were looking dangerous as the second half drew to its close. So, again, Arsenal need to start stepping up. They're getting away with it right now, but I don't know if it will be sustainable going forward. And especially when the Champions League starts and they're going to be in it, that's going to be telling as well for the Gunners. So, interesting stuff does lie ahead for Mikel Arteta's side. So far, so good in terms of obviously being unbeaten and everything. But really, they should be looking at 12 points from 12 right now. And instead, they're looking at 10 points from 12, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but that could be the difference come the end of the season. Brighton in 6th, start of the season off brilliantly well. You would think that maybe losing their 2 key players in midfield. We talked about how Liverpool's midfield has gone in the rebuild. Brighton's has gone very similar. They've lost 2 key players in that midfield over the course of the summer in Alexis McAllister and Moises Caicedo, and they've simply just replaced them with ease. And this team continues to go from strength to strength despite seemingly looking weaker with the way that they are losing players to big money and obviously rival teams. Couldn't fault them enough. Like, obviously against West Ham, dreadful result. They didn't take their chances, and part of that was down to some excellent goalkeeping from Areola in the West Ham goal. Fantastic goalkeeping performance that day. But for Brighton, 9 points from 12. A poor result against West Ham. Few defensive errors in that game cost them. But ultimately, beating Newcastle by 3-0. Excellent result. Brilliant result on the opening day of the season against Luton. And then, I don't remember who they beat on the second day. Was it? I want to say it was Wolves or Everton. I want to say it was Wolves or Everton, but I don't remember. Look. It was Wolves. I was right to trust my gut. Of course, it was 4-1. It was a absolutely ruthless display by Brighton on that day. Very good result there. Brighton continue to go from strength to strength. It'll be interesting to see them when the Europa League comes around, whether or not that's going to hinder them or whether that's going to enhance them in some sort of way. It'll be interesting to see that. So we'll wait and see. Crystal Palace in 7th. Started off the season in pretty mediocre fashion for Roy Hodgson's side. Only lost to Arsenal. 2 wins and 1 draw, 1 loss. Very good start to the season by Roy Hodgson's side. I predicted them to be mid-table, to be fair, and it does seem so far like they're doing okay right now. Brentford are in 8th. Unbeaten, like I say, 1 win and 3 draws from their opening 4 games. Again, maybe you could say that maybe they should have got more points than what they have done, particularly in that last game that they played against Bournemouth. Again, a couple of defensive errors cost them in that game, but at the other end of the pitch, they hit the post like 3 or 4 times during that entire game. So Brentford played very well in that game. They probably should have got more points on the board right now, but unbeaten, taking 6 points in the opening 4 games. Not so bad for a side that was being judged upon how much they'd missed Ivan Toney. I guess you could argue that maybe Ivan Toney has been missed because they may have actually got more points on the board with his better ability at finishing. But in saying that, Mbeumo and Visa have started off the season in very, very good fashion. So them two capitalizing for the absent Ivan Toney is something that obviously has worked in Brentford's favour right now, and they'll be hoping that continues. They just need to sort out defensive issues a little bit in terms of making some mistakes, but apart from that, they'll be fine. Nottingham Forest are in 9th, 2 wins and 2 losses. Again, like I say with them, like, they've got a good squad building up, and they've got some dangerous players within that squad. And, their home form is not an issue. Their home form is certainly not an issue. And they've actually picked up 3 points away from home this season already against Chelsea. They lost to Arsenal on the opening day of the season by 2-1. Close game in the end. I didn't think they were in it for the first half, and then second half they slowly grew into the game. They got a goal back for Munye, who, like I say, is, in my opinion, pretty underrated, and I quite like the guy. I think he works perfectly in that Forest system. If they can keep him fit, he's going to be a big part in their season and staying up. And I think, like I said, that game would have gone on for another 10 minutes or so. Forest may have actually got something from that game, but it is what it is, and unfortunately they didn't. The next game, they beat Sheffield United by 2-1. Good result there. They left it late. They needed Chris Wood, of all people, to get the winning goal in the latter stages of the game, but still a very good result at home against a newly promoted side, a game that realistically Forest should be looking at making count those types of fixtures if they want to stay up, like they did last season when, of course, they faced those kinds of teams at home at the City Ground. Losing 3-2 to Manchester United was going to be always a tough game, but at the same time, they went 2-0 up inside the opening 5 minutes. And I feel like a better defensive team would have actually held on to at least a point in that game, or may have actually gone on to secure all 3. But Forest defence has been not very reliable and pretty shaky at times. And we saw that definitely in that Manchester United game, where they were making a few poor errors that ultimately cost them that game. And they'll be kicking themselves for not at least holding on to the point in that one, especially, like I say, after going 2-0 up in the opening game. And then to, of course, beat Chelsea in the way that they did. Yes, they rode their luck at times, and if it hadn't been for some poor Chelsea finishing, Forest may have actually gone on to lose that game. But as it is, a big result, and an even bigger result when you consider that it's at Stamford Bridge and it was away from home. So big result there for Steve Cooper's side. They've done pretty well so far this season. And I always have a bit of a soft spot for Forest, obviously being from Nottingham. So, fingers crossed for them and that they can actually go on and have a good season. Aston Villa in 10th, 2 wins, 2 losses. 2 losses being against Liverpool and Newcastle. Wins against Burnley and Everton, of course. Everton, they absolutely smashed Everton. Yeah, Villa have been a bit hit and miss this season, haven't they? I think the Europa Conference League is also taking its toll on them, and I would expect it to take its toll on them when they, of course, go into the group stages, and hopefully they progress in that competition and go further. I'm interested to see Villa this season. I think they made some really good signings. I think Moussa Diaby's hit the ground running. I think he's been really good. Ollie Watkins can't seem to hit the back of the net right now, which is a bit of a worrying sign for Villa. He's had plenty of chances, but can't seem to find the back of the net. I'm interested to see them this season. I think when they've lost heavy, and it's been a bit surprising that, because normally an Unai Emery side doesn't lose that heavy. I think they got dominated against by Newcastle. They got smashed to pieces by Liverpool. It's going to be interesting to see how they progress. It's going to be interesting to see how they progress. I think this high line doesn't exactly suit Pau Torres, which is a bit weird. And I think he's slowly starting to have to get used to the Premier League and used to, obviously, Unai Emery again. I thought it would be a good signing. So far, I haven't been proven that. But yeah, we're waiting to see how Aston Villa progress. Another side that's got 2 wins and 2 losses is Manchester United. This team, honestly, hasn't begun the season off great. Their best performance was against Arsenal, in which they lost by 3-1. And of course, there were reasons why that 3-1 result happened and why it kind of flatters Arsenal a little bit. And they were a little bit unfortunate, in all honesty. If Garnacho times his run a split second earlier, he's probably onside and probably goes on to score the winning goal in that game. They rode their luck against Wolves and were very fortunate to pick up the win in that one. They lost to Tottenham. They had a good first half, but crumbled in the second half. And against Nottingham Forest, they were 2-0 down within the opening 5 minutes and managed to fight back to win 3-2. Against any other side, like I keep saying, that were better defensively, they wouldn't have got away with it in the way that they have done. But as it is, they have managed to pick up 6 points from their opening 4 games. And they have a whole host of problems. They have a whole host of problems both on and off the pitch. Owners, Glazers, this Antony situation developing, the whole Jadon Sancho versus Erik ten Hag situation, which has been developing across the international break, hasn't exactly gone to plan. Ten Hag needs to pull something out of the bag here for United to continue in the progression that, of course, he laid before them last season. Like, it can happen. I think the signing of Amrabat might be might be a good addition to the squad if obviously they can keep him fit. Rasmus Højlund is going to be back properly after the international break. We finally get to see him more. He had a good cameo appearance, in my opinion, against Arsenal, but we'll have to wait and see more of him as the game progresses. But they do have a tough game on the horizon when the Premier League does return. And that is, of course, against Brighton, who are ripping teams apart and scoring goals for fun. That could be a huge game for United. A huge, huge game for United. And yeah, and with the Champions League on the horizon as well, it's going to be very interesting to see how United continue with this season. Chelsea up next in 12th. Chelsea's season has been what we've known of them for the past year or so. They look good on the ball. They're passing the ball around well. They're creating chances. But they can't score. They simply cannot score. Nicholas Jackson has all the makings of a good striker. He looks very, very good. His movement is good. His intelligence is good. His ability to play make and his ability to drop deep and to pull out wide and to create space for others looks very, very good. His finishing and his composure, abysmal right now. He's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of raw talent. He's going to be one for the future. If he can work on his finishing, if he can work on his composure, he is going to be a very, very good striker. But his finishing is poor. And it's letting down the side because he keeps on getting all these chances and it's letting down the side. But again, Chelsea have kind of dug their own grave on this one because unless they're going to play Nkunku up front, he's going to have to hit the ground running when he comes back, if that is to be the case, because they've not signed a top quality enough striker. They've got one with a lot of potential. Their squad is full of immense potential. Not so much in terms of experience, but is full of immense potential. Raheem Sterling has started off the season very well. Defensively, they've looked a bit hit and miss. In the midfield, Caicedo's not started the season off very well. Lavia is going to be injured for the next several weeks. This side needs to gel, and this side needs time. It needs patience. Are the Chelsea fans going to give Maurizio Pochettino that amount of patience and time? The overall hope is that yes, because otherwise they're going to go from manager to manager and they're going to have summers like they did last summer, which they get rid of half a team and they bring in a new team. And then a new manager comes in who doesn't like that team. So he gets rid of half a team and brings in a new team. And the cycle is going to continue because this Chelsea setup seems to be a bit chaotic right now. It's got the potential and it's got the vision, but they don't know the steps to get there so far. And the more that Todd Boehly continues to interfere, particularly in club matters on the pitch, the less this side will get to where they want to be. That's just my opinion on it. And like I say, he can't take fault for the amount of chances that Chelsea are missing. Like, anyone with a brain would have said that, okay, we've got this striker, bring in a more experienced striker that can actually hit the ball into the back of the net, and maybe we can bleed Jackson in time. He doesn't have to have all the potential, he doesn't have to have the world of expectation of Chelsea Football Club on his shoulders to score the goals for us. He can actually share that weight with someone else. Maybe Nkunku was going to be that guy, but we don't actually know how Nkunku is going to fit in when he does return from injury. So we'll wait and see on Nkunku, but Jackson really needs to start finding the back of the net. It's otherwise the Michael Jackson memes and everything are going to only continue. So we shall see. Fulham in 13th. I said it wouldn't be as easy of a season as it was last time for Fulham. They started off the season okay. They'll still feel a little hard done by that. Maybe they might have got something from that Manchester City game had obviously the VAR call had called the goal that puts City back in front offside. But yeah, only a win against Everton and a draw against Arsenal to show for it. They've got fight, but it won't be as easy of a season as it was for them last season, in which they obviously pulled out a very respectable mid-table finish. Newcastle in 14th. It hasn't been the same season, has it? And I know it's been a tough start for them. They've faced the likes of Newcastle, Liverpool and Brighton, as well as Aston Villa, to kick the season off for the Magpies, but it hasn't been exactly the same season as it has been for them last campaign, has it, for Eddie Howe's side? And I think it'll only get tougher once Champions League football rolls around. I think this Newcastle side right now might be in a little bit of danger and a little bit of hot water, even at this early stage of the competition. Like I said, I know they've had a very tough start. I know there are going to be easier games on the horizon for the Magpies, which could benefit them and help them. But with Champions League football on the horizon, it's going to be interesting to see how they manage to balance that overall play. Wolves in 15th. Like I say, a bit chaotic of a start to the season with them changing managers so quickly before the season began. 1 win, 3 losses. They were unfortunate not to get anything from that Manchester United game. But, you know, losing to Crystal Palace the way that they did, obviously they managed to win against Everton, but lots of teams win against Everton. And then, of course, an absolute thumping against Brighton. It's not looking particularly great for Wolves right now. We'll have to wait and see how their season progresses. Bournemouth in 16th. You know what? I'll say this about Bournemouth. They play some good stuff. I've watched them a few times. I watched them against Liverpool. I watched them against Brentford. I watched them a little bit against, sorry, not the Brentford game, the one before that. I watched them against Tottenham. That was it. Tottenham. They lost 2-0 to Tottenham. I saw them against Tottenham. I saw them against Liverpool. And I watched a little bit of them against both West Ham and Brentford. They don't play some bad stuff. Bournemouth don't play some bad stuff. The issue with Bournemouth is that they can't put the ball into the back of the net. That's their main issue. They can't put the ball into the back of the net. And defensively, they've got some issues as well. But mainly, they can't put the ball into the back of the net. This new manager's come in and, like I say, it looks good. It looks easy on the eye and everything. But, yeah, they can't put the ball into the back of the net. It is a bit worrying there for them. We'll wait and see if, obviously, they can find a solution to that problem. But, yeah, I see them struggling. That's why I said that they go down this season. So we'll wait and see on that one. Sheffield United got points on the board last time out against Everton in 17th. Unfortunate not to get anything from that City game. I thought they battled very hard in that City game and they just lacked concentration when it mattered most towards the end of that game. which is why they conceded it. Unlucky maybe not to pick up anything in Nottingham Forest as well. Class goal by, is it Hamer? Hamer, absolute class goal by him. And not to get anything from that game was probably tough to take as well. And then, of course, drawing against Everton, in which, if it hadn't been for an incredible double save by Jordan Pickford, Sheffield United may have actually got something from that game. So it's unfortunate that they haven't got more points on the board. They battled very hard, but these are the fine margins and differences from the Championship and the Premier League that they're going to have to work out. So wait and see. Everton, 18th. Took them until the fourth game to actually score, and then like buses, when you wait ages for one and then two come along at once. 2-2 it finished between them and Sheffield United, of course. The lack of goal scorer, the lack of clinical goal scorer, and the absolute hope is that this new signing, Beto, is going to be the guy to produce them goals. He had a good debut. He had a good debut against Sheffield United, a good Premier League debut against the Blades in that one. He looks strong. He looks like a physical presence, and he looks like he's got a bit of speed and a bit of agility about him as well. That could cause some defenders some issues. So he does look pretty interesting of a player to watch, but whether or not he's going to be the guy to get Everton the 15 to 20 goals a season that they need to stay up is going to be another factor altogether. We'll wait and see if he can be their saviour in front of goal for the Toffees on that one. Bit surprising that Sean Dyche's side haven't been as defensively resolute as what we know a Sean Dyche's side normally is, but whether that will come with time or not remains to be seen. Luton in 19th, a poor start to the season for the Premier League new boys, as has Burnley as well. They make up the final two places in 19th and 20th. Luton and Burnley both are playing like it's Championship again. And Luton, obviously, I've watched a bit more of Luton. They battled hard. They battled hard against West Ham. They battled hard against Chelsea and Brighton for the first hour or so of those games, but they don't have seemingly the endurance or stamina to go beyond the hour mark, it seems. And once the second goal went in against them at Chelsea, and once I think the third goal went in after it being 2-1 to Brighton in that game, Luton collapsed. Luton simply collapsed, and they caved in. And in the Premier League, they will sense blood and they will take advantage of that. You do worry for both of these sides, especially Burnley as well, who seem to be playing like it's the Championship. They're not going to get the same fine margins or bigger margins, shall we say, or the same level of time on the ball or anything along those lines that you would get in the Championship. So, like I say, they've obviously got a lot of work to do, both of those sides. Both of those sides have got a lot of work to do. If they're going to need to get points on the board, which of course they're going to need to. I know they've only played 3 games each, but that game obviously between themselves was postponed. So yeah, there you have it. We'll obviously have to wait and see on those two teams, especially if they can turn their fortunes around. But they're going to have to make some big changes going forward, and they're going to need to obviously work on their game plans a little bit, particularly in the latter stages of games. Burnley absolutely battered by Spurs. They put up a good fight against Manchester City. I think the 3-0 scoreline did favour City. I think it was more of a question of quality of finishing, I guess you'd say, between themselves and City. But against Aston Villa, yeah, they weren't great at all. But I mean, they made several mistakes that ultimately cost them the game. And like I say, from Luton's point of view, they battle well. There's a lot of heart and desire in that Luton side, but there's just a lack of overall quality. There's a lack of overall quality, and there seems to be this seemingly lagginess at the end of the game in which, I don't know whether it's tiredness, I don't know whether it's in the intensity of the Premier League, it just seems to get to them a little bit, and ultimately they crumble towards the end of games. And that's just the way that I see it. But we're going to end it there. This has been a bit of a Premier League and slight news roundup. I guess you'd say these have been thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it. This guy, I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of any of the stories that I talk about? What do you make of the Premier League mainly? But I would like to know your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, on any of the stuff that I talk about, whether it be the international break, England, Gareth Southgate, the whole Paul Pogba situation, but mainly, of course, about the Premier League. I'm sure it'll all make for interesting reading and great reading down below in the comments section. So do get involved down there. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. Both of those things are always and very greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. I will see you speak to you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. See you soon.